The Beacon, celebrating when God uses the unexpected to do the unexplainable.
Hey, well, welcome to The Beacon. My name is Steve Woods. I serve as your host. I also have with me my faithful co-host, Jeff Blake from Phoenix Christian Preparatory School, who sponsors The Beacon. Jeff, welcome this morning.
Hey, Steve, thank you. Thanks for hosting. This is going to be a great show. I'm looking forward to learn more from our guest this morning.
Well, and we're delighted to have a guest. In fact, we're honored to have with us from the Arizona State House of Representatives, representing District 11 since 2015. Welcome with us, Mark Finchem. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, we're just delighted to have you on the program. And Jeff, this is a connection that was made through a previous guest of ours. Tell us a little bit about the background and how we were connected with Mark for the program today.
Absolutely. A while back, Phoenix Christian had an opportunity to support the Beacon, to be a table sponsor at an event through Salem Media called Morality in the 21st Century. And a co-sponsored table that evening was ACSTO, a proud supporter of educational freedom. And in a conversation with Sally Henry, one of their leaders, she said, "You have to meet Mark. He's a champion and leader for educational freedom in the state legislature. And I promise you, he'd be an incredible guest on your show, and there's lots to learn from him." And so she gives a very strong endorsement for you, Mark.
Well, and I hope I'm worthy of the endorsement. So,
well, we are just truly grateful that you would invest the time with us, Mark. We know that your schedule is full and it's busy, and we appreciate you taking the time. I think the listeners will enjoy hearing a little bit about your story as well. And I suspect that like others, we've been fortunate to have Nancy Bartow on the program, and maybe there's a common thread. I'm certain there are those who grow up thinking, you know what, I'm going to be in politics. That's my aim, my objective. But I have a feeling that doesn't happen all the time. And that certainly isn't your story, is it, Mark?
No, that is not my story at all. I retired as a DPS trooper in West Michigan, public safety officer, which that function was firefighting. I was a level 3 paramedic, so basically a corpsman. And a law enforcement officer, all wrapped into one. City had a lot of money invested in me. I did 21 years, and then through a number of mishaps, my wife got the ranch. I was also a rancher at the same time. Okay. And I got my pension, and we went our separate ways. Moved to Tucson because I thought I wanted to work for American Airlines as a ticket agent, answering the question, what's the cheapest fare from here to there? That lasted about 18 months. A guy who's used to lots of adrenaline, sitting in a chair behind a desk, not very challenged. That didn't work out so well. So went back to the firefighting community, was a hotshot in a type 2 forest fire crew for a couple of years. Until I realized that at 43 years old, that is a young man's job. And just decided that it was time for me to maybe exit that chapter of my life. Got my real estate license, did a number of things. And then one day through our church, I was invited to join a mission team to go to Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan, as you might know, is a former Soviet Union satellite. And in that environment, they do not have something called property rights. So owning property, all the property belonged to the state. And at the time, the Muslim community was making inroads, and the Christian leaders in that area said, hey, we need some help. Otherwise, our country is going to just flounder. So they put together a team of about 20 people. Wanted to have somebody who knew about property rights. I've been a constitutional scholar for a very long time. And they said, we've looked around and we think the United States is a great model for us to rebuild our nation. And this was quite some time ago. This was 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. And they were still in the let's sort this thing out mode. My wife and I started raising money because no mission goes for free. Got about halfway to the number, and suddenly doors started closing on us. And we're prayerful, and we noticed something's changed. So we put it up to prayer, and a few days later, my mom had a stroke. which was debilitating for a period of time. She's thankfully recovered from most of it. But it was very clear that we had received a signal. This is not the mission that I have for you. As we were remarking before you started recording, man plans and God laughs. Well,
that's right.
In this case, he really had a joke for me, because about 3 weeks later, I got a phone call saying, "Hey, we're going to have an opening in the state legislature. Would you consider running for office?" And I'm like, you're sure? Okay. I think we need to talk about this, because I'm probably not the right guy. And they said, well,
right.
You're on our short list. We're looking for somebody who is not afraid to stand up, who is a vocal businessman in the community, and who has what we believe you have, but we would like to talk to you. So we sat down and had a conversation. I said, well, I've been divorced more than once. I have had a colorful life. I'm a broken man who's been redeemed. But I'm faithful to my God. I'm faithful to Jesus Christ, my Savior. Yeah. And they said, look, you've got nothing on Bill Clinton. So we would like to have you join us. And the moment that decision was made, doors literally flew off of hinges for me. And since I was elected 7 years ago, which is it's almost inconceivable how fast the time has flown. But I've had the pleasure of working with people like Nancy Bartow. In fact, Nancy and I are co-chairman of the Legislative Prayer Caucus, which is an outreach program through the Congressional Prayer Caucus. And that all came about because I had essentially stood up for prayer on the House floor and was viciously attacked in the Arizona newspapers for separation of church and state and all this garbage, which, by the way, doesn't exist, but the secular world likes to point to a letter, part of a letter. And Leah Carawan reached out to me, and she said, we'd like to start a legislative prayer caucus in Arizona. You'll be the 28th state. And then something happened that I just never dreamed would happen. And it gets me misty-eyed even today. I'm usually at the office very early in the morning when we're in session, because I live a fairly ordered life, usually going to school and studying Constitution and statutes and all that. So I'm at the office at about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and my phone starts ringing. And I thought, I can't just let it go. So I answered one of the calls because it was a Maryland number, and I'm thinking, why would Maryland be calling here? And the individual on the phone said, I'm trying to reach Representative Mark Finchem. It's like, you got him. Really? And she said, I want you to know that my husband and I are praying for you. Wow. I said, why? Because you stood up for Jesus in the legislative chamber against the people who would attack him. Well, throughout the day, I received over 300 phone calls.
Wow.
That had been put out by the Congressional Prayer Caucus, asking people to call us.
Yeah. To
this day, that there are people who would do that.
Yeah.
That's an amazing thing for me. So,
right.
But we've had a lot of tough battles, and in fact, we've got one battle that we just won here a couple of weeks ago in the Supreme Court, which I had written an amicus brief, and that is Espinoza v. the Montana Department of Revenue, challenging what's known as the Blaine Amendments, B-L-A-I-N-E. And if your listeners don't know what that is, I urge them to go out and do a Google search and read up on that. But essentially, the Supreme Court found that it was a impermissible intrusion on the First Amendment. What that means is that public tax education dollars we already know this, that those dollars follow the child until the parent assigns those dollars to a school. And
Right.
up to this point, with the Blaine Amendment, schools were private schools, whether they were fairly religious schools, for example, the Catholic school, the Jewish school, whatever. The fact that they were a school didn't matter because they were attached to some form of religion, and somebody made the argument, well, that's an endorsement of religion, which is absurd. Anyhow,
Right.
That's been overturned, and now those funds can follow the child. And with what we're engaged in right now with this whole COVID-19 thing,
Yeah.
my question to the governor this week, in fact, this call is very timely, was we have this thing called empowerment scholarship accounts. And it's very narrowly crafted for people. There's barriers to people using it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to fit within a certain group. And my note to the governor was, look, since we have schools that refuse to open, and we have taxpayers who are paying taxes for schools.
2 minutes.
How about maybe we provide those dollars to any parent who requests them and suspend the barriers so that their kids can get an education at whatever school the parents may choose. I see that President Trump actually picked up on that message. Over the last several days, he's reiterated it several times. So sorry to have gone down a rabbit hole, but I think that that's one of the battles that I was sent here to fight.
Well, there's no question. And, the entire theme of our program, as we talked about off the air, is how God uses the unexpected to do the unexplainable. And here you are, somebody who is prayerful about their lives, available when God calls, and on one path, seemingly to a completely foreign country. When God says, no, I have something different in mind, you having no idea, say, okay, fine. What is that? We'll pray about it. We'll wait on the Lord. And then you get this invitation to be a part of something that you might never have dreamt that you would be a part of. And then it's affirmed, not just by the conversation and the normal track, but by this series of 300 calls of people saying, hey, I'm praying for you. You need to know that I'm praying for you because you stood up for Jesus Christ, and because you stood up for prayer, and because you stood up for, for what matters, and took the arrows and the hits that come with that. And that's it. That's what we're about at the Beacon, is celebrating how God will take the availability of somebody and not necessarily based on our qualifications, and use it. So when we come back in the next segment, we're going to unpack that a little further with Mark Finchem. Thank you for tuning in to the Beacon.
The Beacon is presented by Phoenix Christian, a school celebrating excellence in education since 1949. Learn more at phoenixchristian.org.
Hey, well, welcome back to the Beacon. This episode features Mark Finchem, our guest from District 11 of the Arizona State House of Representatives. Again, Mark, thank you so much for being with us on this program.
It's a pleasure.
Well, we're delighted, and I think our conversation off the air and between segments is as meaningful to me as everything we're talking about in the program. And for the benefit of our listeners, life is kind of one of those, what is that, an old Beatles lyric, I think, that life's what happens when you're busy making other plans. And, in all of our lives,
Roger that.
In between the things that God calls us to, there's a lot of things going on. And, on a very personal level, Mark and his wife and their family are going through a season right now that maybe some of our listeners have experienced as well, in the loss of a family member, in this case, one that is furry from head to toe. And, we've gotten to meet, because we're on Zoom and because we're talking to Mark through his office, we've gotten to meet his companion, Hank, of 13 years, who is just an amazing friend. Here's a little shot of, or we're gonna maybe get a shot of Hank. Anyway, Hank is awesome, and Hank lost his compadre, and the Finchem family lost their loyal friend and pet, Patch, recently. And Mark, I know that's only been a couple weeks, and I know it's hard for you and for everybody involved, but just tell us a little bit about, in the life that you live, which, as we hear, and I heard you mention in the break, that politics can be a blood sport, and maybe it's gone to the next level here in the recent times. The importance of that respite and that loyal compadre of Hank, and of course of Patch.
Yeah. So Hank is one of those precious little souls that doesn't like to be alone. And we got Patch, was a pound pup who was slated for euthanasia. And he instantly fit in to Hank's life and ours. And Patch was that dog that he's the one that got up with me at 0500 and waited for me to get a cup of coffee, and then wanted up in my lap. And he was our little grunter dog. Grunt, 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 grunt until I pay attention to you. But I think that is a marvelous picture for what God seeks from us. And he brings those creatures into our life to remind us that there is a means by which you can show unrestrained, absolute love, affection for your master. And I miss him terribly. I know Hank does. Hank right now you can just tell he's very sad. Yeah. So he's at the office with me today. I don't usually do this, but my wife's out of town, and I just didn't have the heart to leave him home by himself for 8 hours. So he's resting comfortably on the floor. But I think the important message there is that God really wants us to crawl up in his lap and talk to him and I don't do that near enough because I get so distracted by the things of the world. I'm a rescuer, so I feel as though if things go sideways for society, it's my job to fix it. Right. And once you're elected into office, everybody thinks that's your job to fix it. So it is very nice to have that opportunity to go for a walk and have a guy look up at you and say, "I love you."
Right. Yeah. Without expectation, without any condition.
Well, there is one condition. Make sure you feed me, let me get outside. Other than that, we're good. Yeah.
Other than that, it's all your agenda.
That's right.
That's the main thing. That's really right. Good. Well, thanks for that glimpse into a really important part of your personal life and the blur of activities that I'm certain that you deal with, especially, in times like this. We're faced with this global pandemic. There's a myriad of issues that have arisen that are not typical or normal. Unprecedented is a word that fits really well. But as you mentioned at the end of the last segment, it's also shining a light on some areas and some opportunities that maybe should be looked at a little closer. We know that you have a record, that you're a champion of educational freedom and the opportunity for dollars to follow the students and the positive impact that has for families individually and ultimately for the educational system. Phoenix Christian, and I can let Jeff speak to this, is just a very vocal supporter of having choice in education and having opportunities for families to choose and for students to be in a scenario that best fits them for learning. And Jeff, speak to that for a minute, and then let's give Mark an opportunity to talk about ways in which that can continue to come to fruition. I mean, Arizona is on the forefront of the country in our opportunities, and yet there's still so much work to be done.
Well, first, let me just thank Mark and others that champion this cause. Phoenix Christian is a school that, again, God orchestrated, but legislators and leaders that pushed for this. Phoenix Christian is a school that lives in the wake of this benefit. And what has happened is that God has used this opportunity to flip Christian education on its head. In a school like Phoenix Christian that celebrates 70 years, it's been redefined. Our creator still continues to create. He's done that at Phoenix Christian, and every day on this campus walks in a beautiful tapestry of students of great diversity. And we're proud to boast that we're a school of no majority, and students and families that would never have the opportunity to attend a private Christian school like Phoenix Christian are here because of the work that you and others do, and you are changing lives, and I see it every day, and I want to thank you for that.
That has been one of the big pleasures of my life, and it's one of those that I if you'd have asked me 10 years ago, would I be able to make the kind of impact on society that I think that we're making?
2 minutes.
I would not have even dreamed of it. So I think that one of the reasons that Arizona is consistently on the cutting edge of securing civil liberties is we're the youngest of the lower 48.
Mm-hmm.
We've only been a state since 1912. And I think a lot of people forget that. And because we don't have things that have been so cast in stone since the early 1600s, we have a totally different worldview. And that is that if it's for the benefit of our constituents, we need to examine it. And I think that one of the things that the public school system does not do a very good job of is teaching people how to think critically. And I don't mean to be critical, I mean to go to test things. What is it that I'm being told, and is there evidence that supports that? So, the reason I'm such a big supporter of school choice is because I believe it's one of those fundamental rights that isn't given by government, that is given by God, and we're commanded in the Bible to teach our children in the way that they should go, so that when they're older, they will know. It doesn't say tell government to do it. It's just we are responsible to do it. So I think that's an important piece of the puzzle.
Well, this is an important topic. We have an honored guest in Mark Finchem. When we come back in the next segment, we'll continue our conversation. Thank you for joining the Beacon broadcast today.
The Beacon is made possible by Phoenix Christian and listeners like you.
Hey, so welcome back. So here on the Beacon, we celebrate ways in which God uses the unexpected to do the unexplainable. And I think that, our country is in part a great example of that concept, and how we got to where we are and where we're going. All of that falls under a sovereign God who's given us the opportunity to make directional decisions. But he's also given us some guideposts along the way. And in talking with Mark today on the program, and especially in the last segment where we learned about education and how that's happening, and it's such an important issue that Mark has continued to stand up for in allowing parents the opportunity to make their choices with educational freedom in the state of Arizona. And Mark, in this segment, I just really want to have the listeners hear from you, your heartbeat as to why that's so important for our society, for not only our state, but our country.
Well, so the framers of our Constitution, I think, recognize that without an adequate foundation, the sciences really wouldn't matter. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is, there's this notion that we come to consensus. Well, and I firmly believe that consensus is the enemy of critical thinking, because it says get in line or you'll be ostracized. Well, Galileo, that guy was a critical thinker. Whether people like him or not, Columbus, that guy was a critical thinker. Copernicus, there's all of these scientists of history were critical thinkers because they didn't agree with consensus. They challenged it. And that's what critical thinking is all about. So our Constitution, document that it is, was referred to by a number of founders. And I know that Benjamin Rush, John Jay, all agreed that the way our government was formed, the framework, the Constitution for self-governance, a new thing, by the way, in the world at the time, there had always been a king or an overseer who seized power. And here we had people who said, well, no, we're going to work towards the people governing themselves as much as possible. Well, the comment was, and I'll paraphrase this, that our Constitution is suitable for a righteous and moral people. It is wholly unsuited for any other. And by that means if we don't have as our foundation a recognition that our Creator has constantly given us things to discover. He hasn't revealed everything to us. look at, for example, the Hubble telescope. We're able to peer deep, 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 deep into space, and we've figured out mathematically that light travels, that this happened a long time ago. We're just now seeing it. All those kinds of things. That's critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's founded in the recognition. In fact, by the way, I continue to believe that the Big Bang only proves that God blew his breath upon the universe and created all of this. It offers us the opportunity to question. And I think that that's going back to my analogy with Patch sitting in my lap.
Yeah.
I got to believe that that dog questioned some of the things that I did.
Sure.
But he accepted me. So yeah, I'm going to question. I'm here to question. I'm here to discover. I'm here to. God had created us with an inquisitive mind, and He wanted us to have this opportunity to discover great things that He has laid out for us, but He's not yet revealed, because He wanted to give us the joy, the opportunity to discover those things. And I'm amazed by that concept every single day.
Well, for sure, and in the sense that, yes, this is the first experiment, if you will, on self-governance. And yet, in reality, we're not without a king. We're not without a God who we can subject ourselves to. And in that realm, now we're free to self-govern, because we're within parameters that He's given us that are guideposts by which we can mark our lives. And if we work within that freedom, all of that freedom inside those parameters, He promises, an outcome that's for our well-being. But He gives us the freedom to go outside of those parameters, and then,
that goes back to
personally
choice.
and corporately, that can be a train wreck. Yeah, exactly. He gives us that freedom of choice.
It can either be accretive or it can be destructive.
That's right.
Too much of anything is a bad thing. So the question becomes, we've got guardrails, we've got the book of life in front of us, we've got the owner's manual.
Yeah.
That it's the accumulated knowledge and the God-inspired documentation of. Tell you what, and in fact, I would challenge any secular person listening to this. Can you point to any part of Proverbs and tell me that isn't a map to good living?
That's right. That's right. Well, welcome.
Give me one.
Welcome, listeners. We're going to unpack that again in our fourth and final segment, coming up right after this break.
Phoenix Christian believes strongly in its rich history and bright future, now equipping students from pre-K through 12th grade. Learn how you can help continue its legacy of Christ-centered education at phoenixchristian.org/support. You're listening to The Beacon, presented by Phoenix Christian.
All right. Well, welcome back to our fourth and final segment for this program of The Beacon, where I think we're having as much fun off the air as we are on the air. And this has been just a great time having Mark Finchem. If you just happened to tune into this episode, man, you caught a great episode of The Beacon. We invite you to go to wherever you get your podcasts and catch this from the top or any other episode of The Beacon. And you can find them also at phoenixchristian.org/beacon. And so Mark is currently in the State House of Representatives of Arizona, but prior to that, in a number of lives, he served faithfully as in the Department of Public Safety in Michigan. He's been a ticketing agent for a brief stint for American Airlines. He was a hot shot on the fire lines of Arizona, and now after a real estate career and a perpetual student, we've learned he's continuing his studies. Having graduated from Grand Canyon University and now continuing his studies at University of Arizona. Now he serves in the State House of Representatives. And Mark, it's just a thrill, man. It's just so fun to get the opportunity to know you personally, for our listeners to learn about you. And, as I mentioned off the air, it's an encouragement for me personally, and I think it will be for others to know there's somebody who loves the Lord, loves this word, and loves this state and people in it enough to stand up and speak the truth with love, I'm sure, on the House floor. And thank you for being that person. You mentioned off the air, you're not the only one, that we have a number of of folks in the Senate, or I'm sorry, in the House that are, and probably in the Senate as well, that are operating in the fear of the Lord and hopefully with the guidance of His Word.
I think that constituents around the state, and I believe that that's one of the reasons that we have a conservative Republican majority. Constituents around the state would be relieved to know just how many believers there are in both the House and Senate. We typically on Wednesdays will have the Majority Leaders Bible Study. That's fairly well attended. We'll have, and because of committee work and all the things that when we're in session, it's a hectic day, but we'll have anywhere from 10 to 15 members in and out during the Bible study.
Cool.
And typically they'll be there for 15, 20 minutes. Then Tuesday mornings, we have the Legislative Prayer Caucus meets for an hour just to pray over members, to pray over their lives, their families, the work that we do. And one of the big things that we pray for is unity within the body. Because at the end of the day, once the election's over, we represent everybody. And while I may disagree with the worldview of the secular community, I still am bound to pray for them.
You bet.
I still am bound to serve them. Yeah. It's an odd way to look at it, I guess, but I am an indentured servant. And if I don't display servant leadership, I serve God, the interests of God first, and then the interests of man. And if my compass is telling me, yeah, the world would like me to go here, but God's telling me to go here, the default is to follow what I believe God is telling me to do, because there's a reason. We talked earlier about man plans, God laughs.
Yeah.
As much as we want to plan, as much as we think that we're going to do something that is a safety net for the people of the state of Arizona, there's always going to be that unintended consequence. And we're seeing that right now. Not to be too critical of the governor, but I think that we have gone way overboard with executive orders, for example. And when that was put in place by the legislature, they didn't anticipate that a governor would go so far with this. So they did not include the advice and consent of the legislature to hold that's been a kind of a theme in our conversation. Our constitutions always have checks and balances, whether they're federal or state. And we don't have that check, that balance to say, with all due respect, Governor, we would like to hear the evidence that you are basing your decisions on, and then we'll provide you advice. We'll see if we can rebuild or reconstitute the work based upon your data. And if we're able to confirm that, this may be the right direction to go. But we want to know why you are taking this action, and then bring that into alignment with what the people need. One of the things that's a big topic right now is whether or not to open schools. Okay, well, there's a couple things going on there. Let's unpack that for a second. You have taxpayers who are paying money to the government for the education of children.
Right.
If we're not going to educate children, do they get a rebate? If we're not going to educate children in a public school, if the school refuses to open or the teachers refuse to go back into the school, should that money be released to the parent so that the parent can find a school or a teacher, contract teacher, who will hold classes and teach their children? So what we're seeing with this, and I think that this is one of those places where God's taking something that happened in the world and is turning it to drive critical thinking in how can we do things better? Right? So are we now in a position where, whether you're liberal or conservative, and I was on an interview earlier this morning before this, we've got liberal parents who are now saying, I want my kid back in school. I am not supportive of teachers who demand to be paid yet don't show up for work.
Right.
Well, that's a sea change in thought, because up to several months ago, it was, we support teachers no matter what. Well,
Sure.
now there's some conditions on that. We're going to support you as long as you come back to work. So, and there are different things that are emerging in the education front. I mean, we've got this concept of co-op schools.
Right. Micro schools.
You might have micro schools where,
Yeah.
and this is a great demonstration of self-governance.
Right.
We don't have to have the government tell us how to educate our kids. Now, yes, we're a compulsory education state, as are most of them, but think about this for just a moment. We've got, I don't know, half a dozen parents who've got half a dozen or more kids, all living in the same community. They might be in the same neighborhood, and the parents are talking to each other, which is community, calm instead of chaos.
Right.
And they say, what would you guys think about pooling our money together, roughly $11,500, so we'll call it $12,000 per child. You get 5 or 6 kids together, you can now hire a teacher,
Yep.
a generalist,
Yep.
to say, this is what we're going to do from 8 o'clock today until 3 o'clock this afternoon, 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And parents, I will work for you on one condition. At least one of you is in the classroom every day. You figure out who you are, but I would like to have at least one parent in the classroom every day to assist. So what are we doing? We're actually drawing community closer. Parents remain involved. In fact, in my own neighborhood, just since this whole COVID-19 thing has been going on, before we'd see 1 or 2 kids in the park across the street from us by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I now see kids with their parents. I see moms and dads walking their kids with their dog. And it's at least a half dozen or more every single night.
That's a positive outcome in a difficult situation.
God is going to turn this around and brought us together in the family environment. We've got people that are probably turning their phone off and actually eating dinner and talking together. I've had a number of friends tell me, hey, we've had some of these conversations break out about separation of church and state, about the Constitution. My kids are asking me, well, okay, so how is the governor able to abrogate our civil rights?
Mm.
And one of my friends, Ben, he's like, I didn't even know they knew the word abrogate. So they're picking this stuff up. Okay.
Sure.
So, but when we the point that I'm trying to make is we're seeing that competition has entered the educational sphere like a thunderstorm, because schools have been forced to adapt. So distance learning,
Right.
you know, in Arizona we have this thing called open enrollment. If you're dissatisfied or you don't like the school that the public school your child's going to, you can actually cross school boundaries and go to a different public school. All right, so think about this for a second. If you've got an A performing school that has gotten really good at offering distance learning,
Mm-hmm.
and you know where I'm going with this,
Sure.
they can do outreach to an F performing school body and invite those kids to join them online for an A performing school product.
Right.
You want to talk about competition?
Yep.
The F performing schools are going to have to up their game. And
You bet.
it also brings into the mix, if you're able to educate your child and that education funds follow the child to whatever educational experience the parent
2
deems is best, then
Sorry.
we really are advancing the educational system far beyond where we're at today.
Well, it's true. And going back to what you said, and really everything that we just heard from you, Mark, is almost as if God's using a circumstance that we didn't expect to bring about something that we really can't explain apart from this unprecedented season in time, you know, whether it's families coming closer together, whether it's schools being forced to compete or become more competitive in new ways. In all of that, the one thing I didn't hear you say is that teachers should be forced to go back to work. That's not what I didn't hear you say that.
No.
But what I did hear you say that I think is encouraging and will be for the listeners, especially those who have students, is that, well, that's fine. Don't be forced to go back, But then why should I relinquish the funds, the money that's being given for that task when that task isn't being performed? It's fine. You don't have to do it, but let me take those funds and get that task done by somebody who can, will, or is able to do it at this time. And that is not a conversation that was easily had, let's call it 7 months ago.
Yeah. So God has always used those challenges.
Right.
In our weakness, he becomes evidently strong.
Right. Always strong, but then we realize it when we're weak, right?
And when we're on the other side. And
Yeah.
it's like, dang, I didn't see that coming. So yeah, I think you make a very good point. And frankly, I don't want a teacher in front of kids that doesn't want to be there.
Boy, no joke. No kidding.
2
Well,
minutes.
we know this, that problems present opportunities. And if there's
That's right.
And if there's a takeaway from our conversation today, I want to thank you for that, Mark. I mean, I'm so grateful for you. I'm so thankful for the opportunity and for Sally's recommendation that we get the chance to meet you. We will continue to pray for you and for the other legislators and
I appreciate
the decisions and the path. And we'll pray for those prayer groups and that caucus that gets together and studies the Bible together, and that would be a number that grows and that would be something that is pleasing to our Heavenly Father and beneficial to our community. And Jeff, in the last minute or so that we have, just let us give you that time as an educator to kind of respond to everything you've heard from Mark today.
You bet. Let me encourage Mark, and let me encourage the listener that there is a school in the heart of the city committed to loving our God with all their heart, soul, and mind. And a term that I've heard this morning is critical thinking. I want you to know in the heart of the city, there is still classes built around studying. I've heard you reference the Federalist Papers. I've heard you reference the Constitution. I want you to know in the heart of the city, there are still classes going on that focus on critical thinking and understanding of the Constitution, the brilliance of Madison that is alive and well at a school like Phoenix Christian Preparatory School.
Well, Jeff, we thank you. We thank Phoenix Christian for being our sponsor. We thank Mark for being our guest. We thank 960 The Patriot for airing the program. Miriam, who keeps us on track. Jeremy, our producer in the studio. And to you, the listener, thank you for tuning into this episode. We hope you've enjoyed the Beacon, and we hope you have a great day in Christ Jesus.